So good to be here. I love this church. Can you believe what I found at Dillard's the other day? I mean, can you believe this? And they had the audacity to put this on the clearance rack. I just couldn't believe it. And I went up to the clearance rack and I looked at it. I even touched it. And then I said, who in the world would buy a jacket like this? And then I thought about it and I said, I would. Because orange is the color of hope for orphans. And I knew that on this day I would be at Harvest Connection and it would be Orphan Sunday and it'd be the perfect day to wear an orange blazer. So you like it? All right. Now, Orphan Sunday is not something that we really celebrate. You know, we're not excited that there are 100 to 150 million orphans in the world. But it's a day that we remember orphans, and we try to do something to actually help orphans, as we're going to do today. I love this church because you do so many wonderful things, and I bet you don't even know all the good things that you're doing around the world. And I get to partner with you in so many ways, and thank you, Curtis, for inviting me to speak today. But I get to partner with you in so many ways. For instance, you have a church that you support and you planted in Cap-Haitian, Haiti. It's called Place of Joy. Now, Haiti, I think right now is probably the worst place in the world. I don't know any place that's having more problems than Haiti. But there in Haiti, in Cap-Haiti, there's a church there, and it's got an orphanage with it, and it's got a school with it, and it's got a clinic with it. And in Haiti, the president not too long ago was killed, and gangs took over the entire country. And so every place you go, the country is being run by gangs. And so I was talking to the preacher that you support there. His name is Ronald Dormius. And Ronald was saying that the compound of Place of Joy is totally surrounded by gangs with automatic weapons. And I said, wow. I said, well, I guess the church didn't even meet last week. Yeah, I can't imagine. And he said, no, we met last week. He said, we were packed. There wasn't an empty seat. And can you imagine that? That you got a place that you have to meander through gangs with automatic weapons just to get to church. And that's Place of Joy. What a name, Place of Joy, when you have to go through a bunch of gangs to get to church. I'm so excited that you help in a place that's called Samburu. And Samburu is, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later, but in Samburu, it is in a place of war. And it's a horrible war that's going on there. And right in the middle of one of the worst wars you can imagine, one of the most violent, is a place of peace. You know what it's called? Harvest Connection. Right there, you're preaching the good news of Jesus Christ about the Prince of Peace, right in the middle of a place that's got a horrible war that's going on there. There's a place called Turkana. And it might be the worst famine in the world. I remember when Audie and I went there for the very first time. It hadn't rained in 5 or 6 years, and we went there. And now you can go right there in the middle of this desert where it hadn't been raining, and you know what you'll find? Harvest Connection. You'll find hope. You'll find living water. You'll find a group of people that are worshiping Jesus, just like you are. They look a little bit different from you. They'll sing a little different from you, but they worship the same God as you, and because you're supporting them. And I thank you. You drill so many water wells there, and there's water in that place. And there hadn't rained in years and years and years, but you have drilled water wells there that will last decades. And they give out water, and people stand in line for the water 24/7. It's a marvelous thing that many of you have done. I know some of these individuals have supported water wells. I know we can do one for $5,000 because we got matching funds. And then the church itself has done water wells like ones in Turkana. And then there's a city called Eldoret that's in Kenya. And Eldoret has a ministry that was started because there were so many AIDS orphans there. And it was called ECAN, Eldoret Christian AIDS Network. And it just started growing and growing and growing. And first it just supported children who had AIDS. And now we planted a great big church right in the middle of that city of Eldoret. And you know what that church is called? Harvest Connection. And people are finding out about the Lord. I told you about that church last year when I was here. And I said, it's a great church, but it has the world's worst parking lot. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, it was very muddy, and you could go in there, and yeah, but it's got a new one. Look at this. When I went in there the first time, it wasn't just muddy. My vehicle sunk. It took about 12 people to push the vehicle out of this parking lot. And now you've got a brick parking lot. It is so good. I love it. And I don't sink when I go there anymore. And right next to it, that's Place of Joy in Haiti. Look how full that place is. And they all walked into this building, Place of Joy, that you support through a bunch of gangs with automatic weapons. All of these are just Harvest connections all over the world. You're doing some good stuff, some really, really good stuff. And today is Orphan Sunday. And when I think of Orphan Sunday, I think of so many orphans. And maybe the one that I think of the most is a kid. And his name was Evans. Now, Evans, meeting him changed my life. And meeting him haunted me. I would have the image of his face just haunting my life. He lived in a place called Mount Elgon, which is a very beautiful place, but very isolated, and it's maybe one of the most violent places in the world. And little Evans was one day in his hut. He calls it a house, and somebody knocks at the door, and he was in there with his mom and dad, and a soldier walked into the hut, and right in front of Evans' eyes, murdered his mother and dad. And Evans went into shock. Let me show you a picture of him. He just went into shock. And it's the weirdest thing happened. When he went into shock, his hair turned completely white. I mean, it was black before. And then after he saw his parents killed, his hair just turned snow white. And he had no place to go. They took over his house. They burned it down. And Evans was just walking around on this mountain. I found him there, and this is the picture that was taken the day that he had lost his parents. And I found him there, and he had no place to go. He was just walking around, no one to take care of him. I found a woman named Penina, and I asked Penina, I said, could you give Evans a place to stay? And so she started housing him for a while, and then I took a picture of him, and then I put it on what we call a promo, one of these kids that you can sponsor, like Matt was talking about. That was just a great letter, Matt. I'm telling you, I love that letter. And so anyhow, we put that on. There was a college student in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that saw that picture, and he could not just leave that picture there. He had to sponsor Evans. And so he sponsored Evans, and Evans got some food, and Evans got a place to stay, and Evans got to go to school there on Mount Elgon. We have a primary school, and Evans went there. Well, later a few years later, I was over in Kenya again, and I was at our premier high school. It's called Susie Peacock. And it's just a wonderful school. One year it was voted #1 academically in the entire country of Kenya. And so I was there, and as I was walking along, there was another worker for CRF that was with me and said, "Did you see Evans?" And I said, "No." And they said, "We walked right by him." And I said, "If I'd have walked right by Evans," I said, "I would have noticed him because his face haunts my being." That face is just embedded right in my brain. I cannot forget it. And he said, "Well, you walked right by him." And I said, "I didn't just walk right by Evans and not notice him." They said, "Yeah, let's go back and see." So we walked back to see Evans, and here he is. Here's a picture of him. Can you believe that? I mean, that shows what a little food will do, what some education will do, what some compassion will do, and what the Lord will do. Evans just totally changed his life. And Evans thinks that the best verse in the whole world that he likes to share is that one that's in Romans 12 that talks about overcoming evil with good. And that's kind of the motto of his life, is that verse there in Romans 12:21. You should overcome evil with good. I wrote a book. It wasn't I wrote the one on discipleship, but I wrote another book, and I like the title of it. It's called How to Love Someone You Can't Stand. Because we all have some people we just can't stand, some that are kind of mini versions of I can't stand them, and some are huge like Evans. He can't stand the people that broke into the hut and killed his parents. And we don't usually have that much can't stand, but we have some can't stand. And the passage that's really written for us to tell us how to love someone you can't stand is found in Romans 12. And I'm going to read it for you because if you got somebody you can't stand, this is what you need to do. It says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. And then here it is. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And that became the theme of Evan's life. I've hardly run into anybody that's experienced more evil than Evans. And yet, you saw that big smile on his face because he decided that evil would not have the last word. Good would. And I want to tell you about one of your missionaries that you need to pray for a lot because he's a great guy. His name is Barnabas Sarum. And Barnabas Sarum, he had been wronged big time and evil abounded. But there's a story, and that's not the end. I usually call Barnabas the guy with the big smile. He just always has a smile and has a big smile on his face, and that's how you would describe him, the guy with the big smile. I met Barnabas at the same time I met the person that I talked to you about last year. I talked to you about meeting a guy on July 12th and standing in front of the post office in Eldoret, Kenya, and I'd never seen him before. He invited me to meet him there, and he said, will you help me with my kids? I hear you help people with their kids. And so I said, sure. And I'm thinking he's talking about he's got a couple of kids at home. Instead, he's got 150 AIDS orphans, and those are his kids. And he wanted me to help with them. And so anyhow, I did, and we helped him and all that kind of stuff. But standing beside this guy that I call Francis B. was Barnabas Sarum. And Barnabas, on that day, just launched a whole dimension of his life. He decided that he would take care of orphans. And over the years, Barnabas has taken care of thousands of orphans. And you support him. He is one of your missionaries. And a few years ago, Barnabas decided that he wanted to go to a place called Samburu. And he wanted to go there. And Samburu is one of the hardest places in all the world to minister to people. And he told me his mission. He says, this is what I'm going to do, Milton. Listen to his job description. He said, I'm going to plant churches. I'm going to teach agriculture. I'm going to raise cattle. I'm going to drill water wells. I'm going to start schools for orphans. And I'm going to protect women who are being abused. Quite a job description, right? And yet he does it. That's what he does. And you support him so that he can do that in Samburu. There's two problems with ministering in Samburu. The first one is it's in the middle of a famine. One of the worst famines in the world is there in Samburu. It hasn't rained in years. And the other problem of ministering in Samburu is there's a big war that's going on there. The last time I went there, it took me 9 hours to get there from not very far away because I had to go through a war. And I had to have military escort to get through this war to get there to go to church. And then the last time I was there, I said, I want to go back to Samburu. And the military said, no, you can't go. We won't allow you to go. I said, well, can you escort me again with the military? And they said, no, it's too dangerous. Even with the military, they decided it was too dangerous to go back to this spot. And so that's where Barnabas ministers every day. And Barnabas, he said, I want some cows. and so I said, okay. And I sent him some money for some cattle. And he writes back in an email and said, no, I wanted good cows. I think that's the way of saying, you did not send enough money. Matt, I didn't know how expensive cows can be, even in Africa. Cattle are expensive. And so anyhow, I sent him some more money, and you helped buy him some cattle too. And then he was so happy. I mean, that big smile on his face, it even got bigger when he got all these new cows. And then, you will not believe it, somebody stole all of his cows. cattle rustlers in Samburu, and they stole all of his cows. And Barnabas quit smiling there for a while. I mean, he just couldn't, because he finally got all the cows. He finally got good cows, and then somebody just steals them and takes them away from him. And so Barnabas got in his pickup that you bought for him. That's the way he gets around the desert and helps plant churches, is through this pickup. And you bought him this pickup. So he got in his pickup and started out to look for his cattle. Now, I told you it had not rained there in years, right? Okay. That was until he got in his pickup to look for the cattle, and they had a flash flood. And he gets stuck in a brand new river, and he had to get people to push him out of the river because it had not rained in years till he takes off into a desert to look for cattle. And so he takes off, and he's looking every place throughout the desert for these cows. And, I mean, he can't find them. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack because it's a big desert. And he didn't know what direction the cattle rustlers went, but he just keeps on going, keeps on looking for the cows. And he ends up in an area that he had never been in before. And he found a tribe that he had never seen or met before, and it was a tribe that he had never even heard of before. And so he didn't know what to do because this is a place of a lot of war. And he's thinking, I may go see these guys and they may kill me because I don't know if they're good guys, if they're bad guys. I don't know if they're my side, somebody else's side. I don't really have a side other than God's side, but they may not be on God's side. And so Barnabas went over to check out these guys, this new tribe. And he found that they were very friendly. And they welcomed him. And Barnabas learned that they have three big problems. One, they did not have clean water. And so most of the people who were gathered there had typhoid because they do not have clean water. So that was the first problem. The second problem was they did not know about Jesus. Somehow in the history of missions, no one had ever been to this place to tell people about Jesus. And so Barnabas there, you don't know Jesus? You'd never really heard of Jesus? They didn't. The third problem is they did not have a school. They did not have any schools. They did not have a history of having any schools. And so everybody in this community was illiterate because they did not have any schools. And so to make a long story shorter, Barnabas, he contacted Hope Water Africa. Now, Hope Water Africa is the ministry of Christian Relief Fund that drills water wells in Africa. And so he contacted us, and so we went to this spot that Barnabas had never heard of before, that we'd never heard of before, and we started drilling water wells and got them fresh water. And then Barnabas started preaching there, and he started telling them about the good news of Jesus that they'd never heard before. And people started responding to the good news of Jesus Christ. And so Barnabas planted churches in this area. And then he started a school for all these kids that had never, ever been to school. And so he started on that first day with 31 children. We took pictures and tried to get them sponsored because so many of them were orphaned because of the famine that was going on there. And so I started thinking about that whole story. And you were so involved in it, okay? Because this is your missionary. And I started thinking about that story, and I thought, isn't it amazing how God works? We have a bunch of cattle rustlers, and they push over some dominoes that start falling. And if these cattle of Barnabas hadn't been stolen, you got a whole tribe of people that would have never had water, never had clean water. If these guys hadn't have stole those cattle, all of these people, this entire tribe, would have never heard of Jesus. If these cattle had not been stolen, there would have never been a school there. The children would not know how to read. The children would not know anything about their own history even. And it all happened because of a bunch of cattle rustlers. Well, to make matters even better, Barnabas kept searching for his cattle, and he found every one of them. Isn't that great? And it just goes to show that evil can absolutely be overcome with good. I mean, when it all started, it just looked like an evil story. Looks like Evan's story. It's just evil. But we have a God who has a tendency, it's his nature really, to do good right in the middle of all kinds of evil. And so I thought this story was kind of good because it tells you what Christian Relief Fund does, and it tells you what you do when we partner together. We drill water wells. We plant churches. We bring relief to disaster areas, not just in Africa. We've been bringing relief to the victims of the hurricanes on the East Coast. We're still bringing relief to the fire victims here on the Panhandle. And we bring relief, and you help do that. I was telling you last year about Mr. Beast partnering with Christian Relief Fund. And you've probably seen the video, I built 100 wells in Africa. Well, that was in partnership with us. And he drilled a lot of wells. But before Mr. Beast ever joined us to drill water wells, Harvest Connection did, right? Individuals here. This church here. We had a deal going. Somebody that was the CEO of Justin Boots, it was matching and is still matching. You know, if you give $5,000, he gives $5,000 to drill a clean water well. And you started doing that. And then with those water wells that we started drilling, that you drilled many of those, we planted 232 churches. And we started sponsoring children. And I love it that you take mission trips to see your children in Africa and down in Mexico and Piedras Negras. But you changed the lives of people like Evans. Evans has changed, remember his first face? It was shock. His second face is smiles. And that's what you're doing when you support these children. You're changing shock to smiles. Just by $35 a month, about $1 a day, you can totally transform a kid's life like Evans. You can get him food. You can get him an education. You can get him clothes to wear. You can get him a place to stay. And you can get him spiritual training about Jesus. They told me to tell you, people over there, they told me to tell you something special. A bunch of kids did. They said, tell them Asante Mara Trillion. We like to say that there. It means thank you a trillion times. Harvest Connection, thank you a trillion times. You're doing some good things. Thank you for remembering orphans and doing something to help orphans on Orphan Sunday. And let's be a bunch of people that don't get overcome by evil, okay? Because a lot of evil is going to happen to us, but let's remember that evil doesn't have the last word, right? There's good in this world, and there'll always be good in this world. Good that can change shock to smiles. We're going to have a time here that if you need a prayer, some of you need a prayer. In Philippians 4, it says, don't worry about anything, but in all your prayers, ask God for what you need. And we've got a prayer team that's coming right up here, and you can ask God for what you need. Whatever it is you need, whatever is kind of causing you to be having a smile, disappear from your face, you can talk to the Lord about that. And you can talk to brothers and sisters here about that, and we will definitely pray. And come see me back at the table later, okay? And look at the orphans. And if you can't sponsor one today, stop by and just pray over one, okay? Let's stand up, and we're going to have a time here of prayer. Come down here to the front.
Pray for all the orphan children, for the stories that we just heard. We're thankful, Jesus, for the gospel of your life, that you can take a bad story and turn it into good. I'm just thankful for these stories. I'm thankful for you're always working in our lives. And Father, I just pray for everyone in this room right now for maybe who's having a bad story right now. I just ask for your presence, your love, your forgiveness, to stir in our hearts, to lead us to a place to come to your feet, to your altar, to seek your presence, which will bring us a new testimony. So I just pray, God, that you just lead us by your Spirit. And I just pray to help us to remember the orphans, to keep them in our prayers each and every day, Father. That we pray for them, that they are close to our hearts. So, Lord, once again, we give you praise. and glory forever and ever. Amen. Have a good day.